In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some amazing beginner to advanced tarot decks that you can use wherever you are in your tarot practice, depending on what level you are. And these are just some of the decks that I really enjoy in my practice. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. So I wanted to share some tarot decks with you today that could take someone from the beginning phases of their practice through to being intermediate and then advanced. I have quite a large tarot deck collection, and you may have seen some of my videos sharing my collection. I quickly realised that when I went to go look at my decks, I had a lot that I wanted to share because I love all of these decks that I have, and I use some of them more frequently than I use others, but I still really enjoy them. And I put together a number of different combinations, and I realised that I wouldn't be happy with any of them because I thought, well, I need to have a list of specifications. I need to go through each deck and decide out of 10 like what it gets for each specification, and then I just thought, well, my mind is just gonna explode because I haven't actually classified my decks like that before, and that's quite a big job just in itself, and I'm just one person, and I know no one else is going to feel the same about their decks as I do, and no one else is going to have the same aesthetic of decks that they prefer. So I decided instead just to allow myself to go with examples of decks that I feel are really great decks to use as a beginner, as an intermediate, and as an advanced practitioner. And this video is not suggesting that these decks are my favourite or the decks that I use the most at all. These are just decks that I felt would illustrate this topic really well. I will also add that I mostly stuck to mass market decks for this video because I feel that if someone is new to reading tarot, they are most likely going to want to just spend a small amount on a tarot deck, as well as then learning to read with other tarot decks and exploring different aesthetics. Someone may not wish to spend £50 or £100 on an independent tarot deck at the beginning part of their practice when they're first learning and first getting excited by it. I think I definitely went through a phase of collecting mass market decks that I really loved the aesthetics of, and found that I could read with them really easily, some more so than others. And so I feel like talking about some mass market decks in this context is really helpful. Another thing I also noticed was that a lot of the independent decks I feel are more advanced in category, or at least intermediate to advanced, because the imagery often deviates further away from the typical archetypal imagery that we're used to. So that's one thing that I thought was quite interesting to note. But I will offer a few independent decks that I absolutely love to share some of my thoughts around those and why they are amazing independent decks to look for as well. The first deck is the Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. So if you are new to tarot, you have probably seen these images by Pamela Colman Smith, and these are the images that you will be used to seeing in tarot books, etc., because this is the most popular tarot deck, arguably, that there has ever been and that there ever was. I mean, really, I think statistically it is. This was conceived by Arthur Edward Waite, and he was a member of the Golden Dawn, so that is the lens through which this tarot deck was created. I'm not going to talk much more about that. The Centennial was created 100 years after the original. It's supposed to be as close to the original Rider-Waite-Smith, and it has very nice colouring. It's more muted in tone compared to some of the other editions, and it's just a lovely deck to work with because the cardstock is so buttery and it shuffles really beautifully, and it's just a really fantastic learning deck, I think. So even if you want to start reading with other decks, if you're a beginner and you don't particularly jive with this imagery, which is what I hear a lot, then I still think it's good to have a copy of this deck, and that way you can learn with it, you can study with it and work with it with a tarot book and learn all the meanings and start practicing readings with it. Even if for fun you want to be using other decks, this is a really good place to start. So I would definitely advise starting with the Rider-Waite-Smith, and this is my favourite version for everyday use, the Centennial. Again, if you're new to tarot, I think a lovely way to go is one of these. This is the Doreen, Virtue and Radleigh Valentine Fairy Tarot cards. There's also the Angel Tarot cards. Now, if you are new to this whole world, you may not know that Doreen Virtue is now actually a born-again Christian, so that turned quite a lot of people off, as you can imagine. So these decks are actually out of print. I picked mine up from eBay. I had a few Doreen Virtue decks before she left the community, however I picked up a few more from eBay since, but this deck is still available in print, I believe, just by Radleigh Valentine, but I like having this original. This is lovely if you want to start reading with the cards for yourself straight out the gate, but you're not really sure what the meanings are and you don't really jive with that imagery, and you know, you might wish to start learning slowly but you want to start reading for yourself straight away. I think this is a really great deck. I wouldn't necessarily advise that someone who is completely brand new to tarot pick this deck up and then start reading for others. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you wanted to be reading for yourself or maybe some friends, and you know, you don't want to have to start from scratch, learn everything first, this is a good way to go. Again, not for other people and not charging money, I'm not suggesting that. But this is nice because it has a title. So you've got the Princess of Autumn. Autumn in this deck corresponds to the Pentacles. In the guidebook it explains which of the seasons correspond to which suit. So in this deck, the Princess of Autumn is the Page of Earth. That would be your Pentacles suit. That is not the association I have. I draw my elemental associations from Wiccan teachings, and in that, winter is the suit of Pentacles, so it's slightly different, but this is in the guidebook anyway, so everything you need is right here. So if you wanted to get started and you really aren't into learning about the Rider-Waite-Smith yet, then, you know, don't worry, you can get something like this and delve right in. Now, for me, I love using this for myself, for friends and family, and I'm not offering readings yet, but it is something that I am going to be doing soon, and if someone wanted me to read with this, I would. I personally think, though, this is really nice for personal readings. Do you know what I mean? The Princess of Autumn here is studious, responsible, cheerful, mischievous, and here there is a message as well, and it says, happy news about your career, promotions or scholarships, well thought out plans that go perfectly, needing a little push to get going. So if that is where you are in your practice, I think that's perfectly fine, as long as you know you're not going out and charging people for readings when you don't really know anything about the original tarot. I wouldn't advise that. And again, personally, I think I rather use this for myself and my friends in personal readings. I personally use this more as an oracle deck, but again, as I said, if you are someone who is new to tarot but wants to work on it from an intuitive place first, by all means, that is completely legitimate, and this is a brilliant deck to do that with. I would advocate that you eventually turn your hand to learning the original Rider-Waite-Smith meanings, because they are so deeply ingrained in occult traditions, you know, deriving from the Golden Dawn, and it is really ingrained through many tarot decks other than any Thoth based tarot decks. And if you are unaware, Thoth is a deck by Aleister Crowley, who also came from the Golden Dawn initially. So similar teachings but slightly different deck. So this is a lovely place to start if you're new to tarot, as I said, and you don't want to start with the Rider-Waite-Smith yet, but you want to start reading intuitively for yourself or for your friends or family. This is a great place to go. Next up is a favourite in the community and a favourite of mine. I haven't used it in quite a while because I've been trying purposefully not to use it, because I've used it a lot for the last few years, and that is the Lightseers. This was originally an independent deck by Chris Ann, and then it became a mass market deck, and it is a favourite in our community. The images are beautiful, they are very bohemian, and they are very contemporary in nature. They very much illustrate the emotions behind the certain, I mean, you can see there, that Four of Cups, you can really see the emotions. They're beautifully drawn, really vibrant colours. There is nothing not to like about this deck. I think it's really expressive, there's a lot of beautiful movement in it. All of the main messages carry across. Some of the symbolism isn't there that you have in your Rider-Waite-Smith, and that's another reason why I would always advocate that people go to the Rider-Waite-Smith and learn it. But if you are drawn to this kind of imagery and you want to start working with the tarot straight away, but then have a tarot deck like the Rider-Waite-Smith on the side to learn from, I have several friends who purchased this deck as pretty much their first proper tarot deck other than Oracle, and absolutely love it and think the guidebook really works for them, and they're learning tarot that way, and that works for them. And again, I would always advocate that eventually people do go and learn the traditional meanings with a book and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but I am a Rider-Waite-Smith girl, so I will always say that. Especially, I think anyone who wants to take it seriously, to do it professionally, to read for others and charge for readings, I think that is really important work to do. But you know, if you're just reading for yourself, you're reading for friends, you know, you do you. And this is a beautiful, beautiful deck. It's a favourite for a reason of mine and within the community. I feel that a deck that has taken the place of that deck for me in my practice in the last 6 months or so has been this deck, the Numinous Tarot. This is a stunning deck, and it is inclusive and diverse and just absolutely beautiful. This is just such a stunning deck. I love it. You have the vibrant colours there, beautiful contemporary illustrations, very, very relatable scenarios and situations. It is just such a beautiful deck. This is one of my favourite cards there. Just stunning, absolutely stunning. So I would highly recommend this if you are in the market for an independent deck that is sort of similar and that is diverse and inclusive. This is a fantastic deck. This is the Numinous Tarot, and it is by Cedar McCloud. Such a stunning deck. So that's one of my independent picks that I love. Next up is a deck I just fell in love with, and this is Tarot of the Mermaids. This is a low scarabeo mass market deck. There are mermaid decks that are independent as well that I have that I enjoy, but for some reason I always go back to this deck, and I think this is a great deck for beginners because it very much, whilst being mermaids, I feel that it is maybe not a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but it is very much inspired by the imagery of the Rider-Waite-Smith. So you can see how the Rider-Waite-Smith has informed each card within this deck. And I've also found that this just works really fantastically well for any reading to do with love, romance, emotions, sensitive areas, any kind of sadness or fear or worry. This is just a fantastic, fantastic deck. It's beautiful. One thing that I'm not thrilled about this deck is that it's not diverse and inclusive at all, and that is something that within the tarot community we are calling for, because that's what we need. And I would love to see this deck reimagined. Like, I love the style of the illustrations of this deck, and I just love the way it feels. I love everything about this deck, but I just wish that there was more diversity and more inclusivity. So that is something that, again, if you're new to the tarot world, tarot community, that is something that is being asked for from the community, and many tarot deck creators are doing their best to create decks that are more diverse and more inclusive, and I think it's just what we've been needed for a long, long time. I think it is one of those typical, perhaps not Rider-Waite-Smith clones as such, but it's pretty much a Rider-Waite-Smith inspired deck, and it reads beautifully for me, so I love it for that reason. Another fantastic beginner deck that is going to appeal to a lot of people who are witchy inclined is the Modern Witch Tarot. Along these lines, you could go for the Everyday Witch as well by Deborah Blake. You could go for Anne Mora's The Green Witch Tarot. You could go for the True Heart Intuitive Tarot as well. There are lots and lots of decks like this, but I love this deck. I think it's just beautifully, beautifully packaged. This is Liminal 11, and they have made lots of really, really great mass market affordable decks that are fantastic for beginners or intermediate readers. I love, love, love this deck. You'll see why. So it is literally like a modern redrawing of Pamela Colman Smith's deck, but it's diverse, it's inclusive, and it's just fresh and contemporary. In some way, it manages to be a clone whilst also being so contemporary and so relatable. I mean, how often have you felt like that figure right there? And just fantastic for all manner of readings. Like, I've used this for career readings, I've used this for relationship readings, for personal readings, and it just seems to be spot on. It is a fantastic, fantastic deck. Affordable, brilliant for beginners. I mean, I love this. This is like fantastic. And there is another card that comes with that I keep out, and I have it on my altar sometimes. Instead of saying 10 of swords, it says everything is fine. So you could have either one of those within the deck if you wanted to, but I absolutely love this. I think it's just such a great, great deck. And I actually did edge mine as well when I got it. I think I edged it in silver. I really love it. And it's beautiful as well. It's quite thick, so if you have small hands, that's a bit more tricky, but it's definitely worth it. You know, if you are new to tarot, if you are witchy inclined, if you want something more diverse than the Rider-Waite-Smith, this is the perfect way to go. And it's affordable, and yeah, it's just fantastic, fantastic reader. And now I want to talk about some more intermediate kind of decks. Again, there were quite a lot of different decks I could have picked, but I went with these in the end. So The first one is the Druid Craft Tarot. Now, some people might say this is more beginner. I think it probably depends on your frame of reference, really. I think because it's got all of this with it. It's written by Phillip and Stephanie Carr-Gomm, and they are part of Oboj, the Druidry organisation here in the UK, and this is a very, very thorough book. This is fantastic. I feel like this deck maybe is more intermediate because it kind of goes beyond some of the initial things that you would see in the Rider-Waite-Smith. It looks at the archetypes through a different lens. This is obviously Druidic, and so it has a different energy to it, has a different vibe to it. I love using this deck in springtime. It's really beautiful. Another thing about this deck though is the cards are very large. It can be difficult to shuffle, but the imagery is just beautiful. The illustrations are stunning and the meanings are just fantastic. I absolutely love it. A deck that I always think was quite similar is the Wildwood Tarot, but the Wildwood is even more advanced, I would say, than this. I think a beginner could definitely use this deck, but I just think because of the lens through which the archetypes are portrayed, there's more context there, there's more layered meaning, and I think with the book the way it is as well, it demands a little bit more of your attention. It's not just to pick it off the shelf and use it. Obviously if you're using the Rider-Waite-Smith, again, that demands your attention if you are completely brand new to it, right? But I think that you can work with it pretty much straight out of the box. And you know, if you're adept at using tarot, you could work with this straight out of the box as well. So do please take my categories with a pinch of salt. To you, this may be a beginner deck. To others, it may be an intermediate deck. And to others, it might be an advanced deck. It's all really a matter of your perspective. So, but I put it here because I feel like it demands a little bit more of attention. And I feel that it has more context through which you're viewing the archetypes and the energies. And that may take a little bit more time to get used to, a little bit more time to bond with a deck like this, and to be able to see and envision the meanings coming through and for them to have meaning for you. So a similar deck to that is an independent pick is the Oak, Ash and Thorn, and I think this is very much like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but again, because of the context, I feel that it is more in the intermediate area. Now some people might say nope, they think it's perfectly fine as a beginner deck, and again, you could just use it as a beginner deck, but like I said, the context through which you are viewing it, it demands a little bit more of your attention. Also, there isn't a guidebook that goes with this deck. Now, as much as it is the most stunning, oh my gosh, deck in the world, this deck, it's absolutely a masterpiece. And if you are starting to explore the realm of independent decks, I could not recommend this deck more to you. It is so stunning. I think a lot of people within the community love animal decks because for a long time there wasn't the diversity in the tarot decks that we needed, and I think that the animal decks allowed that, but also it makes the reading of a deck like that slightly more advanced, I feel. So again, for that, I feel like this would be an intermediate or advanced deck to pick up. But it is stunning and beautiful and one of my independent picks. Another intermediate pick is this beautiful deck. This is Tarot of the Hidden Realm by Julia Jeffrey and Barbara Moore. Barbara Moore has got a lot of decks that are mass market and fantastic books about tarot. So again, this is quite a meaty book. You can get into this deck. Fantastic meanings there, so it does make it easy. A beginner could pick up this deck, but the reason I think that it is more intermediate is because of, again, the contextual situation of the cards. Sometimes the cards don't really depict what the meaning is, so this was the Nine of Wands, and also a lot of these are very up close and personal. A lot of these cards have people in them, not just the court cards, but a lot of these cards have people in them and it's very close up to the person. You're really getting the vibe of who this person is, and for that reason it's a beautiful deck actually for path working, I think, and for embodying certain energies and manifestation in that way. So yeah, I think this is a beautiful deck, but again, it's a completely different vibe. And I do think you need to have a little bit of tarot knowledge behind you before you embark on using this, but you know, again, as I said, I keep having to like reiterate this, but it is completely up to you. But I do love this deck. I think it is beautiful, very fae. If you're into working with the fairy energy, it's a beautiful deck to go with. I mean, the illustrations, my gosh, come on. Another intermediate deck is the Morgan Greer Tarot. This is a vintage copy that I picked up from eBay. Now, some people will probably say this is a beginner deck, and I think a lot of people started with this deck. It does have very similar illustrations to the Rider-Waite-Smith, I feel that some of the imagery is not as easy to understand or as quick to understand as the Rider-Waite-Smith. I mean, you could say this is basically a clone, but I don't think that you get as much contextual information. A great deck for intermediate practitioners. I love the colour, I love the energy, I love the vibe. It's very 70s. And yeah, I like how you sort of feel like you're a bit more up close and personal again with the archetypes, but they still have that sort of distance to them that they do in the Rider-Waite-Smith as well. So again, it's a clone, really. The Hanson-Roberts is another clone that I would suggest either for beginners or for intermediate practitioners. Colouring pencils. So there is a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that's the Rider-Waite-Smith with colouring pencil by Mary Hanson-Roberts. So, but this is the deck that is created by Mary Hanson-Roberts. And again, yeah, very much a clone. I think you pretty much do get the symbolism there. I do think this is a deck that beginners could work with and intermediates could work with. Now we're into more advanced, I think, and I think the Crow Tarot is a wonderful Rider-Waite-Smith clone. Again, kind of clone, but I do think it's more advanced. And I think the reason being that crows, you can't really tell like what a crow is thinking or feeling because it's just a crow, right? So you have to know your meanings, I think, really, really well. You do get clues from the cards as well, because these are beautifully created by MJ Cullinane, and the way that MJ Cullinane creates the art is by layering lots of different textures with digital art, and it is just stunning. I haven't worked with this deck in a really, really long time. I used to connect to the Morrigan with this deck, but now I tend to use a couple of other decks instead. But this is such a beautiful deck. Yeah, it's just absolutely stunning, but I do think you need to know your meanings, because I think this deck almost works like a pip deck in a way. I mean, the Three of Swords is always a bit like a pip in the Rider-Waite-Smith, but for instance, something like the Nine of Pentacles. Yeah, it's sort of pippish, sort of. Wouldn't call it a pip deck, and I'm not even going into that. I would say pip decks, Marseille decks, and Thoth decks, I would say advanced. But you know, some people might start with reading Marseille, so to them it wouldn't be advanced, but to me, I started with the Rider-Waite-Smith, so to me, I think of pips and the Marseille as advanced, and I think of the Thoth as advanced because it's separate, or yeah, just separate from this. So I'm not really going into pips or Marseille or Thoth in this Thoth-based decks, but I would call this deck advanced within the context of this video from a Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck perspective. But I do love this deck, it's stunning. Stunning, stunning. Next up is the Ostara Tarot, and this is beautiful. I initially thought that this would be kind of more of a beginner deck, but it is quite advanced, I feel, and the reason being that there are 4 different artists, so the art isn't all cohesive. These are beautiful backs. Also, in cards like the Three of Cups here, unless you're used to the art and you know what the rest of the suit looks like, you wouldn't necessarily know that this is the Three of Cups. You need to get to know the deck because some of the imagery is very obscure and doesn't always align with what you think it will. Some of them do. So for instance, this one. This feels like it very much speaks to the Ace of Pentacles or the Ace of Coins, but then some of them feel very abstract. So I think it is a really, really good thing to get to know a deck like this. And also because, as I said, for illustrators, I think it does come together really beautifully. The art is just like being in an art gallery in a deck. I've used this recently, actually. I think I used this for my spring equinox tarot reading. Oh, it's just beautiful. Beautiful art, absolutely stunning. And every card is completely different. There are beautiful depictions within this deck, but it is just a case of you need to know the meanings and you need to have time to get to know this deck in itself as well and what the imagery is speaking to. There's a guidebook, which is lovely. It's also a beautiful box, but it is rather oddly shaped and it's got this annoying little bit of cardboard in it. So this is created by Molly Applejohn, Eden Cook, Krista Gibbard and Julia Ardell. Absolutely stunning. There are 4 illustrators from Vancouver and Meta Art School. So I really love this deck, but again, I would call it advanced in the context of this video. Next up, the Mary L Tarot. I love this deck so much. This is much more of a shadowy, kind of fierce deck. And again, I think this is based on a combination of the Rider-Waite-Smith, the Marseille and the Thoth, if I'm correct, created by Marie Waite. So you have a lot of serpentine imagery there, like the Caduceus, and some of the imagery doesn't seem to kind of align with the original Rider-Waite-Smith meaning. So you need to have time to get to know this deck, time to read the guidebook. When you do, oh my gosh, it's intense. Like the work that, oh, shadow work. This is such a good deck for shadow work. And again, the art is spectacular. I've talked about this deck a lot in my practice because I've used it a lot for healing and shadow work, and it is fierce. I call it a fierce reader because it does not beat around the bush and it gives it to you like straight. But yeah, it is a fantastic deck if you are looking for something more advanced. This is available mass market, as most of these are, I will state if they're not. This is a really powerful, hard-hitting reader, one that I would highly recommend for anyone who's looking for something that's a little bit, you know, toothier than what they're used to, and something you can do shadow work with, really get into the nitty-gritty. And yeah, this is great for that. Next up is the Wild Unknown. This now belongs to my son, so the box is really badly beaten up. I picked this up for myself and then he adopted it because he loved it so much. So now this lives in his room, so I had to go and like steal it for the purposes of this video. So if you've seen any of my tarot collections, this isn't ever in it because this literally lives in my son's room. Now, the Wild Unknown within the tarot community literally shook up what we knew about tarot because the imagery is so different. It's quite pippish, and the illustrations are these like ink drawings, line drawings with pops of colour, and again animals, so it's diverse in that way. It touched a lot of people, I think, this deck, and spoke to a lot of people, but also kind of was enigmatic for a lot of people. For me, I didn't get my hands on this deck till quite late. It was only a couple of years ago that I got my hands on this deck, but I do enjoy it. As I said, now I don't really work with it. I work with my son with it. So you can see like it's all like misshapen. But so what we like to do is we have a book by Kim Krans, who's the creator of The Wild Unknown, and it's a book called Whose Moon Is That? It's really beautiful. So what we do is we read the book and we get cards out that align with the page and that tell the story and just play with it like that. And then by the end of the reading session, the whole deck is all over the floor and we're just playing with it, and he loves it. It's his deck now, and you know, I love that. He may or may not decide to read tarot in the future, but you know, this is something that he loves, and so I love that he loves it and it's his. So you will hardly ever see this on my channel, but it's The Wild Unknown. Next up is the Witch's Wisdom Tarot by Phyllis Curott. Daniel Barlow is the artist, and this deck I think is stunning, but I do think it is advanced because of the way it's been created. It kind of goes backwards. Phyllis Curott is a Wiccan, a witch. She has several books that are fantastic. I love her writing. She's just fantastic, but it is conceived through that lens. And I think that this deck is really, really beautiful for pathworking again, like some of the other decks. It's also really beautiful for kind of exploring yourself, any self-development or spiritual development. I think it's really lovely for healing work. That actually said healing as I said it. That's really weird. This is number 8, healing. So it is a stunning, stunning deck. The courts are also conceived differently. So within the guidebook, you've got your information about what all the court cards are. But again, like this requires your time, your energy. So it is a different kind of deck completely. And that's why I think it is advanced. It's also really big. Like, I'm starting to realise that as much as I love the bigger decks, like I can't work with them so much. Like I have to shuffle them this way. And it just doesn't, those decks I don't tend to use as much. I tend to think of them more as like special decks that I use for like Sabbath readings and such. The decks that I use the most on like an everyday basis or a weekly basis, they are always sort of Rider-Waite-Smith sized. So it's either the Rider-Waite-Smith or it is like a similar deck that's similar cardstock, similar kind of sizing, because I can't deal with this every day. But it is a beautiful deck, and like I said, for very specific things, really fantastic. But I think it's important to read the book with this deck, and lots of people within the community who've worked with this deck I think have done like specific studies working closely with the deck, which I think is definitely something you need to do. And I think when you're in that advanced realm, you kind of need to do that more if you want to create a bond with the deck. I wouldn't say I've ever really created that much of a solid bond with this because I don't think I've used it enough. I've used it for sort of special occasions and I've dipped in and out of the book, but I've never read the book all the way through. And so I think like developing a relationship with a deck like this is really, really important. So it's not one that you can just lift off the shelf and read with like some of the others that we talked about. So for that reason, I feel like it is definitely advanced. And again, with the animals, etc., I think it makes it more advanced in nature. So, but it's a beautiful, beautiful deck. I love it. I couldn't part with it because it is so stunning, and the work that I've done with it has been profound, even if it's been occasional rather than every day. I have a couple more advanced decks that are independent, so these are my independent picks for advanced. The first one being the Blood Moon Tarot. This one came into my life this year, or actually at the end of last year. So I did the Say Yes to the Deck with Lisa Papez on her channel, and we selected this deck for me, but then it wasn't in stock. So in the end, Lisa ordered it for me, and I sent her money through PayPal, and she sent it to me. It was so nice of her to help me. So this deck came from the States. It is independent, as I said, and the imagery isn't all that familiar, and it's not necessarily as easy to work with as some of the other decks. It is more challenging in nature. It is definitely more shadowy. They've also changed the names of the suits. So skins is wands or fire, songs is cups, a dreamer is air, honey is earth, your pentacles. So it's switched up. So again, I think that adds to the element of making it more advanced. It is a beautiful, beautiful deck. Again, absolutely stunning artwork, and oh my gosh, hard hitting, really powerful, really potent reader, kind of scarily accurate, and kind of like, oh, goose pimply, do you know what I mean? So yeah, powerful, powerful deck. Just a really beautiful recommendation if you're looking for an independent deck that's more advanced in that way. And my final advanced pick as an independent deck is the Spirit Keepers Tarot. This is the Revelation edition. This is by Venerable Wen, and this is a stunning, stunning deck. Now, this is advanced because of all the layers of meaning, occult meaning within the deck that Venerable has taken a lot of time to put in there, and all the meaning, profound layers of meaning that you can glean from this. Now, I believe several people that I have been in touch with working with this deck have been using this deck more intuitively, using their knowledge of the cards as is, and then any other additional information on here, so like with planetary and zodiacal information on here, using it as they already understand it and recognizing any imagery they already know from within the deck. If you want to go deep with it, there is first of all a little white book included in the deck. Then there is a massive tome that you can purchase from Lulu, as well as a journal that you can purchase from Lulu. And I have done both, but I have not gotten very far with my studies. I have worked with this deck to do some weekly readings, and I've read from several parts of the book, but I have not really dived deep with my studies because this year I started taking a professional astrology course to teach me how to be an astrologer. So that is something that I want to be able to do in the future, and that is something that I was prioritizing. But this deck for me is like a long, slow burn. So I feel like I'm going to be learning from this deck when I am in my 80s. I'm in my mid-30s now, just for context. So I feel like I'm going to be working with this deck for a very, very long time, and I'm very, very glad to have it. It is part of my plan to learn more about occultism and more of that side of magic as well, because it's something that I haven't delved as deeply with. I came from a background learning about Wicca when I was 11. I started practicing witchcraft throughout my teens, and then I came to learn the tarot. It was the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot when I was 17, and then practiced with that. And then being an adult and having like more solid kind of stability within my life, I was able to add to my knowledge and understanding. I'd like to delve more into sort of occult knowledge. So I feel like this is something that's going to be pivotal with my journey throughout the rest of my life. And I'm very, very glad to have it, but that is why it is an advanced deck for me. And it's also independent, obviously. I think it's now out of print though. So what you might have to do is look on Venerable Wen's website and sign up for when there might be a new edition or a second printing of this edition. But with these independent decks, it is often like that. If you have never bought an independent deck before, you've only bought mass market decks, it's kind of a new thing. You either buy through Etsy, or you buy through the website of the creator or the artist, or you may support a deck on Kickstarter, and that is like a pledge that you pay to get the deck created. It doesn't guarantee that you get the deck in the end. I mean, it should really, because any deck creator that takes everyone's money and then doesn't end up creating a deck. It's kind of a big problem. And I've never pledged on a deck that never made it into my hands. Like whenever I've supported a deck on Kickstarter, it's always come to fruition, and sometimes it's taken longer than other decks, but it's always been well worth it. So Kickstarter is the way a lot of independent creators go. And I feel like I've come to a natural kind of close for this video. I hope that it's been interesting to you if you are new to tarot, or if you are sort of somewhere on your journey, as we all are somewhere along the lines on our journey, just learning and growing, and it never stops. The learning and growing never ever stops. So I think that it's an illusion to think that you get to a destination. It's not like that. So I have loved sharing these decks with you. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do like the video, share it with anyone who you think would also enjoy it. Also, if you're new here and you have been enjoying my content, then please do subscribe. While subscribing, don't forget to hit that little bell notification, because that's how YouTube's going to let you know when I create and upload videos just like this in the future. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me there, where I will be sharing more. I also have an Instagram page and a TikTok page, buy me a coffee page if you'd like to support me there with a coffee, or a direct PayPal link if you'd like to support me that way as well, if Patreon isn't for you. If you made it to the end of the video, please leave me a little book emoji down below. Thank you again so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again in another video really soon. Take care. Bye. Mwah.